Before things are gotten into with this segment, sharing a quote of wisdom. Given proper motivation, almost anyone will believe almost anything. People are stupid and have been conditioned to be so. And in context to that conditioning, the slave state of mind. They will believe a lie because they want to believe it's true, or because they are afraid it might be true. People's heads are full of knowledge, facts, and beliefs. Most of it is false, yet they think it's all true. People can only rarely tell the difference between a lie and the truth, yet confident they can, or all the easier to fool. In terms of the age of knowing that we are coming into, hypervigilance on an unconscious level is at an all-time high. And if we are not willing to face and see things for what they truly are, in terms of that knowing, then everything that is assumed is only going to reveal the latter. And to know is to truly know thyself. And until this takes place, you have not come in to the knowing. And with the thrall and the push on, it's only until you strip away the assumptions that the truth is ever going to be able to reveal itself. Back everyone, this is Seth Casposa, Black Earth Productions, Blue Flame, Healing Arts, and Occult Science, and with an honored guest, Michael Tsarion from the Unslaved Podcast. Many of you out there know about Michael Tsarion. It's the first time that he's been on Black Earth Productions. Michael, I want to say welcome. How are things going on your end in terms of what's been unfolding?
Well, it's always interesting, as you know. I just keep focusing on the work that I need to do, trying to get backlogs out of the way. Fortunately, with the members of Unslaved, they're super loyal, and we've been able to do that. We're not even half done yet. I can't complain, because to see the shelf get cleaned up and topic, Fool Society, stuff on idealism, stuff on Germany, stuff on the Jews, stuff I've wanted to get to for a long, long time. Occult history of America, some subjects that are very big and need revisiting. I wanted to finish part 3 of my occult history of Ireland. There's others, my Gnosticism series that became a 2-part, and they're done. I cannot believe it. And there's other ones as well, including some podcasts. We've done stuff on existentialism I never thought we were going to get to. So there's actually a long list of triumphs. Despite what's going on in the world, the baloney, we've had some fine guests on.
Absolutely.
I cannot complain. There's a few things still sitting on the shelf because I don't have the technology to put them together. There's an idealism series. Only 3 or 4 are out in the member section. So there's about 5 being done. They're filmed and everything, but I don't have the RAM, to edit it. There's one on catastrophism about Beaumont and Velikovsky. Catastrophism is the theory I work with. It filters through into other work, the Atlantis work, and even psychology, because of the impact of these great celestial destructive forces that rain down on our planet in the prehistoric era. It's central to my work. It used to be central just to things like Atlantis and Ireland, but then it became obvious to realize that, wait a minute, the effects mentally in here haven't gone away. So this now takes it into an occult or even in a psychological level. It's just the weird peccadillos that we do. It's not just lemmings jumping off cliffs and weird bizarre behavior socially and mentally that we're going through, i.e. neurosis, pathology. They're too loath. The men in the white coats will not link it back to an ancestral trauma, even though all the evidence is there. So they'll just give you some other nonsense about your childhood and the parents, and that's all true to a point, but that's all overlaid on a mighty trauma that's down below. And it's only things like fiction, your Tolkien's and your Marvel comics, and it's there, the story of that trauma, but it's mostly in a fictional form. So I try to take it up to the next level where I'm bringing it more to a non-fiction, trying to bring it back into psychology, my reading of a lot of things, art. It's in art. You couldn't understand the world's art without understanding it. You couldn't understand the world's film or any of the creativity aspect. And you certainly couldn't understand gender dynamics. This has a lot to do with women, some of their rites and rituals, which were unbelievably foul. And then some of these matriarchs went on to form occult society. So this thing is just absolutely incredible when you start getting into it, once you keep your focus on that. But catastrophism, I have to watch it back myself. All I know is it's damn good. I've got History of the Jews, Part 1. We did a premium called Khazars, but I wanted to extend that. I've got some very, very interesting information that will be in more Part 2, Part 3, but I wanted to do the introduction to launch it in a very sane and sensible way. I love what we did with the Khazar conspiracy. People should watch that. It's very eye-opening. But that's not the end of the story of the Jews and who they are in many ways. They've been very pilloried through the years, erroneously. We want to clear up a lot of that, because then you can get to the real secret societies who really control things and who've set up that particular narrative in order to conceal themselves. Not to say that there aren't Sabbateans and Frankists, of course they are, but who are they really? Are they really representative of the Jews, or are they something else, some parasitical force that has got behind Christianity, Islam, and Judaism?
Right.
So that's a great project that's on its way.
Things in terms of what I've been able to look into over the years on my end all go back to the Sumerian Draconian Empire and Acadia in context, man.
Really?
So things in terms of the cataclysm, this is something I've been able to really, really dive deep into, and even taking it back to Maldek and Chiron in terms of Tara. As you know, Tara Hill in Ireland is a monument to this in context, when the three spirals of creation, as I put it, were all in alignment. So catastrophism and things in context to the precession of the grand cycle, what hit in 2020, as far as what I observed, and a lot of these things being amplified in terms of this invasion and consciousness parasite that they're actually putting in the goddamn fucking needlecraft. And this is something that I think is a repeat of what happened pre-Atlantis, Atlantis, Lemuria, all these things that you covered. Since you really came out and presented, I can back the fuck up in terms of my own research and study. It's absolutely 100% true as far as I'm concerned. But to cover the basis of what I would really want to get into with you, what would you say hit the world in 2020 before all this was unleashed?
It's been before that, the movement of Pluto itself. And then, of course, there's many modalities. I'm very eclectic, but even astrologers were warning that when Pluto started transiting through the sign of Capricorn, they're very antithetical. There's no two ways about that.
Yeah.
That there would be major shakeups leading up to the full Plutonic return of America. Not a solar return, but a Plutonic return. I mean, come on, anybody must know. A simple reading of what Pluto represents, even on some online simpleton page, will tell you dirt from below. So all that's happening is that the pus, the dirt, and this is from prohibition, this is from the mafia, this is from the deep state as it was in the turn of the times. I don't look at any of the Pilgrim Fathers nonsense that we're brought up in school with, or the Puritan, which then morphs into Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons and Moonies and the Amish and fucking. I don't believe any of that was positive. It was a disgusting European manifestation, not just because it was Christian, that's bad enough, but because it had other ecumenical and egalitarian, i.e. socialist basis. If you look at any of the socialist movements today, it might have reared up in front of somebody who's never really thought of it or heard of it before, which crop up in Latin America and communist Russia and all that. There's nothing in any of those socialistic movements that wasn't already in place and championed by Robert Owen, all these settlers, these so-called settlers that we bow in front of in American history. And I'm not even talking about the slaughter of indigenous people, which is, of course, a huge part of it as well, but I don't really even include that. You don't need to. The ideology, Christianized ideology of these founding fathers was a pestilence in that strata we're talking about, seeping there. And a lot of the upper crimes, money crimes, deep state crimes, political division crimes. And the expert on this is actually Kevin MacDonald, the great Kevin MacDonald. We feature on Unslaved. And anybody who's not familiar with his work, go check out our podcast called The Feminization of America, based in this man's latest work. And of course, he's totally hinterlanded. He lost his job in UCLA and he's been just browbeaten ever since. But he's a great, great thinker. And this book is particularly excellent because I see a curve in him. I don't like to see somebody that for 30 years has been in this movement and it's this. I want to see this. And I hopefully will want to see that.
Right.
And you don't get it in most. You get it in Kevin. I myself am like that. And that doesn't mean that their original story of somebody whose stock record isn't a good one, that their story was eye-opening. It was. But the fact is they haven't themselves changed from that stock record. They're not exploring anymore. They're not interested anymore.
Feedback loop, man.
Man, it's incredible.
This is what's happening.
And this is what's happening with some of the greatest names in this movement. I've been tracking it meticulously. So I'd say that certainly since 2010, even before 2012, these people had no ideas. And they still have no ideas today. So there's some great work that's out there that I pick up on. And Kevin MacDonald has really turned the tables with this latest book. Go watch Feminization of America. You'll be mind blown about a conspiracy that's never saw the light of day. While everybody charges after all these other conspiracies, so-called, I go along with you a certain amount of distance. But that is not going to explain too much, especially in the American context. And by the way, it matters to today because there could be an ultra-right wing, the same group we're talking about, has billions of dollars. They're waiting in the wings for these leftists to sort of burn themselves out. And so from 2020, as you say, we've been focusing on this ultra-socialistic group. What is that General Wavell said when you're watching the right hand, Watch the left. If you had to list the greatest statements in the history of the world, all 10, that one is somewhere within 10 or 20. Watch the other hand. And my God, it's such a fantastic statement. And that's what I've been doing. And so I'm very worried about particularly this Puritanistic group appearing maybe in a different guise, but they don't like you and they don't like me. They don't like people like us. They burn us, mate.
Fuck them. And their agendas and their inverted fucking bullshit in terms of triangulation. What hit the world in 2020 was one of the darkest spellcasts of all fucking time. I've been able to verify certain things and other things I presented, but this is absolutely desperate attempt, as far as I'm concerned, to prevent what I know is coming in terms of this Plutonian transiting Capricorn, and in May of 2023, it's going to be going into Aquarius, man. So all of the buildup in terms of the procession and all of the recall and all of the shit that people haven't fucking dealt with, whether they know it or not, has been rising to the surface in terms of waking consciousness, and then honing in on this shit on an unconscious level in terms of their dark sorcery and technology. They are giving the entire fucking world their mind, as you have stated in your dissertation, The Origins of Evil. And in terms of psychology, social dynamics, all of these things are verified. And there's something that I've been talking about. I brought it up recently. Mouse Utopia. It's a documentary, Universe 25. You got to check this out, man. It's an experiment that was done on mice in context to humanity. I'm going to put it in the fucking description as well. And everybody has to see this, because this literally proves triangulation factor from those on top, whether they're in the ethers or on ground level, in this closed loop system that humanity has been caught in for the last 26,000 fucking years. The Atlantean cycle, the fifth cycle, moving into 2020, coming up to the precipice in terms of what people in network that I know call the stellar activation, which kicked off in the year 2000. That's why they did 9/11, to offset the trajectory of activations and awakening and true experience in terms of what is beyond all this igniting. This is what I experienced. Actual shamanic initiation, catastrophism, experience of ritual catharsis that people have been conditioned to avoid at all costs, running out into all the distractions and the propaganda, and with the push on, with the fear that state of fucking mind. And as we know, it's all about our state of mind in terms of the Hermetica. They know it's all about our state of mind. So everybody out there hearing this segment, the things that Michael Tsarion has been covering ever since he came out, I do consider you an indirect mentor, man. A great honor to have you on Black Earth Productions speaking.
Thank you, man.
And
yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
All of this in terms of what's going to continue to progress the legacy of not only what we have been able to develop in our lives, but the legacy of the ancestors and the ancestors' awakening. Going into the origins of evil, I remember watching your dissertation, one of the absolute most profound dissertations I've seen out there, including even now. I don't know if you've read the book called The End of All Evil, but if you have not checked out that book either, man, I'm definitely going to recommend everyone check out The End of All Evil. This book can't even be accessed. They took it off the fucking goddamn shelf, man.
Definitely this Plutonic period, once you said it transits into Aquarius, two things will happen. And one is that whistleblowers will be coming out. Like you thought you knew the word whistleblow? No, there's no way. Whistleblowers like Yuri Bezmenov, they're working on it now, but their conscience and their wives or whatever say, quiet. You better believe that when Pluto hits Aquarius, great people, men and women, are going to step forward and say, right, I know a lot. Now you're going to hear it. So that's one good sign to look for. On the deeper level, Aquarius, as you know, represents the mass. It represents the population and it represents technology. So if we take those side by side, first the mass. Pluto is going to irritate their asses. The sump needed to come up what it is in the greater. We live in dissociation. The masses are what they are because of cognitive dissociation. And even though they need to release that in hysterical form, like we've seen, that doesn't really clean the sump at all. It's a very topical thing, running around with a bunch of other people in the streets. That's not Plutonic. Plutonic is when there's catharsis, like you mentioned, when there's real initiation. I don't see any sign of it yet. That particular transit is going to say, okay, people, let's see. And the only way that Pluto can do it is to break down structures. So it goes into Aquarius, which are the structures of society. Expect those to fail more in order to precipitate the catharsis. Then technology. There's an interesting connection between Uranus and Pluto. They're not incompatible. That looks like, to me, more of the positive technologies, more of the off-the-grid type of life coming in, where the normal technological structures, they've signed their own death warrant. Social media is going to change. It already has. Can't count the amount of platforms, and it hasn't even started yet. Look how quick that happened. That's the Uranian thing.
Right.
And when we had these fake libertarians, they got our trust by acting like true libertarians and open and free, and nobody's going to police you. And of course, all of them have proved false. That still doesn't stop the truer types opening social media platforms or banking platforms and so on. So any major planet transiting Uranian energy will be very, very upsetting to those people who are more of a Saturnian solar mindset, who can't even get to the first step of initiation because they want their life to be track 29 and completely stable.
Yep.
Not going to happen. So there'll be trial and tribulation for those types.
Yeah, they are dealing with that inverted energy of Saturn in terms of Capricorn and all of the constructs that have been erected since, I would say, even going back into the age of Pisces, man. Take it back to the Council of Nicaea, 325 BC, through Constantine, the rise of the fucking Vatican, and all the shit, the burning of the fucking libraries, and then the Dark Ages, and then the fucking wars, and the
Martin Luther.
Right, and then the branch off in terms of that poison fucking root into all of the different denominations and contexts. And I was in ministry for 7 fucking years and have seen myself the seat of the dark Luciferians themselves. Okay. Yeah. So I'm not just coming on doing duck work and trying to entertain people. I take this all very seriously and with passion, and so many things that we could touch upon. Speak a little bit more about the Plutonian energy specifically in context to Scorpio, what you would say to this specifically.
Just in case anybody was rocked by those comments about the founding fathers of America. And I didn't mention deism. We didn't even get into deism. I just kept it to the familiar Pilgrim Father Puritan idea. Anybody who doubts statements like that, be my guest and go and study Calvin's Geneva. Okay? Yeah. Wow. Right. Police state number 1. But getting back to Pluto, many things can be said. Remember, I have a very alternative astrology for people who don't know. It gels. Well, what I would say is Pluto as a planet, which rules Scorpio, I believe it's very good with Gemini. I believe that actually Pluto, if you really get into the occult aspect of it, for me, Mercury is the lower form of Pluto, and Pluto is the higher form. So it involves intellect and communication, as well as the more traditional things that astrologers accept. But in esoteric astrological terms, Pluto was only discovered in 1930. And that was exactly the year that Sigmund Freud was writing Interpretation of Dreams. So there can be no doubt that when these planets are discovered, look at the secular world and find out what's going on. Well, intellectually, the whole of psychoanalysis and psychology was coming online. That's how recent it is. And the tutelary symbol of it, the discovery of Pluto. Similar things can be said of the discovery of Uranus.
Originally, Mars ruled Scorpio.
Right. Mars was the ruler of Scorpio.
Why did they attribute scorpionic energy specifically to Pluto?
That I don't know the reasons for. They discovered this Pluto. They went, where does it fit? And they've been doing this ever since. And sometimes it's a hit or miss. This time they got it right. The evolution of the actual zodiac itself, which is an interesting subject.
Yeah, absolutely. Evolutionary astropsychology and the reformation of these arts and sciences that I know, having applied to my own existence, are absolutely vital for mankind. Demonized over the centuries. The Plutonian energy, though, in terms of the power of transformation, this is what these fuckers fear the most. And I even heard you say this, man, that they fear the Plutonian energy in terms of this specific transit. Is that not true?
Yeah, because it represents the true psyche. Imagine that Mercury rules the conscious world. It contains with it a lot of Plutonic energy. Think of the mercurial energy that was present in a Marie Curie or any of the ones who went down deep into the science. The great discoveries, they're not necessarily Plutonian, they were more mercurial. They didn't realize, in other words, in astrological language, Pluto is exalted in the sign of Gemini, and that's how I read it. So they're working on a Plutonic level, but their penetration into the atom or their penetration into radium, which are really occult substances, the leader is Mercury in the form of the great opener of doors, the Anubis and Herne and Mercury. But that can only go so far. The Plutonic is waiting there. When the sheep divide from the goats, it's really the goats that are going to know what is on the deeper level to make sense of what Mercury has said, open sesame, the mercurial open sesame, and it rules the curiosity, what lies behind the moon, what's matter made of. But the real synthesis, the real decoding or understanding is Plutonic. Like you just said, don't forget, in the tarot cards, it's the death card. So all these egomaniacs and psychopaths and schizoid personality types fear death, because then the game's over. It's game over. Remember, they don't have an afterlife. In fact, they fear it because look at all the sickness and pathology that'll be waiting for them.
Yeah.
There's the ordinary human fear. It's a narcissistic game. These Kissingers, there's no afterlife. I'm just going to die and turn into sand. That's what they all believe. But of course, in the back of their mind here, the limbic realm goes, and what happens if that's not true? There's definitely a fear motive there as well. even though they're psychopaths on our functional level. So that's the first thing I'd say about Pluto. In my system is its connection with Mercury, and it walks hand in hand. So that when you get a mighty soul, like say an Arthur Conan Doyle, who's a Gemini, very classic Gemini. He was in Order of the Golden Dawn. He wasn't just the writer of Sherlock Holmes and this sort of inventor and advised the police and he came up with fingerprints. That's all Gemini stuff, all that kind of thinking. This man was also a leading occultist. That's the Plutonic side. So when you start studying that dynamic, you find out a lot of things come together with people that you imagine are just simply Geminian, intellectually very turned on. No, those people are very, very interested in philosophy, psychology, and so on. When you're talking Pluto in the chart, that's the psychological. Since most of the human race doesn't have any psychology, and the rest of the human race is anti-psychological, including the whole of America, inside out, upside down, every conceivable way. When you see the term psychology on a book or whatever, you're mostly dealing with charlatanism, or you're dealing with the one against the many. But it's certainly not going to be thumbed. People are into neuroscience, even false yogic paths and whatever, and they just don't want to even know the basic, even Freudian level psychology in America. It's never caught on. It's absolutely despised. Few movies that tried to broach it, and they're wonderful films.
Yeah. And
I cite them on my sites. They were box office flops, every single one of them. Many actors and actresses dedicated their time and energy and their money to try and make America psychological. That is Platonic, because that'll catch up. You're tardy in class, you weren't there, well, then you don't get the gold at the end. And so what's happening right now is America reaping the rewards of being not only psychological, but full-blown anti-psychological. They want guys and dolls. They want slasher films. They want, Friday the 13th and a lot of twerking thrown in, candy popcorn. They want Melrose Place and Baywatch. Yeah, it looks real psychological, doesn't it?
It's all preconditioned in terms of culture, as you know, man. And social dynamics, this documentary that I fucking mentioned, it literally proves what has unfolded. And the difference, again, going back to what hit the world in 2020, all of these overlays, all of these distortions, all of the nets, traps, and snares, all of the fucking things that have been implemented, not just this last century, but take it back 26,000, 50,000 years, amplified on an unconscious, subconscious level. So the importance of knowing our own psychology and diving into these arts and sciences and what they actually reveal to the individual in terms of actual initiation. How would you say the true ancients, and I'm not talking about these branch offs in terms of the Brotherhood of the Snake and the Thothians and the cult of Baal and Lilith. You touched upon the female Illuminati and the rise of the fucking matriarch, the inversion of what was once at one time in alignment. What would you say the actual process of initiation was with the ancients that knew the difference here in terms?
Yeah, I look at the Druids, I would look at the Arya. I've written on them extensively, and they were not interested in supernaturalism. That's the aberration that came later. They were interested only in phenomenology, what existed in front of them right here and now. Like a William Blake, every grain of sand sings holy, holy, holy. They were fascinated by the language of our planet, the language of reality, the high science of the time. There was no Vedanta. There was no Puranas. They're all late. If you listen to our Bach saga, you certainly have done that and you've come on yourself. This is talking to the choir here. They were interested in the movement of the sun, but it wasn't a god in the sense that we use that word where it's some deity behind it. When they said Helios, the anthropomorphization came earlier. So in order to understand that question, you have to realize, take away any anthropomorphic. Venus was not a woman. The sun was not Helios or Phoebus or Icarus, or that all came later, the simple Disney packed version, for the Disney audience. The original pre-Vedic didn't have that. When they said sun, they meant the sun, the air, the clouds, the water. When they touched it, that was the sacred thing. I mean, it is the air that's actually keeping you alive. Yeah, it's a god without the anthropomorphic aspect. Water, you drink it. See what happens when you don't, right? So the water was worshipped. Later on, as it all degenerates, then you get these wells, the holy wells, because it had been lost, it had been raped. It's all spaghetti. The further you go back, you get rid of the anthropomorphic Mary or the Lady of Guadalupe or the Venus, Aphrodite or God or Zeus or Jupiter. That's all late. Right. Man communed with what he had in front of him because he saw himself growing out of the planet.
Yes.
He saw himself literally as an emanation. He didn't come from somewhere outside it. He came from within its bosom. And of course, there's going to be likenesses to what women are. It's not that the anthropomorphization is itself bad. The garden was the goddess in 3 forms. That's what you see at Newgrange today. The triple spiral is a goddess symbol. So it's not that the anthropomorphization was bad in its original. It was bound to happen as these associations were made, but it became corrupt. You mentioned the female cults. When the female cults of later matriarchal eras discovered, hey, it's all in sync with my womb power, and this is when it gets corrupted. So the anthropomorphization is negative as we look back through time. But in its original inception, when Isis has the child, there's these anthropomorphic, correspondences made. It launches mythology. There's reasons for it. But in those days, they knew that. They knew that they're not worshiping the stone god of Anubis, or, how they anthropomorphize that. There was a symbol. And the Egyptians were immensely symbol literate. They never made the mistake of fusing the two together, which is done with our ludicrous Moses God up in the sky, Charlton Heston with a beard up in the sky. No, we've lost ourselves in what I call the mysteria. And then they had to sustain it. All them guys on the banks of the Ganges and Buddhists up there in Lhasa, that's big money. So then they had to then borrow from the Hermetic tradition. This is how you get Gnosticism. But that's a fucking Frankenstein monster. What the hell is you selling me with that? And then Christianity forms out of that, various forms of Judaism in Alexandria. They're selling you some filthy, rotten porridge. And it's for us, you see, to go back and look through it and take out the Hermetic element.
Make the goddamn fucking corrections as far as I'm concerned.
Make the corrections, yeah. And then represent pure. And they make sense because that other stuff doesn't make sense. And I lived my whole life to see that. They didn't know what I was seeing. Just because I don't say it, punk, doesn't mean I'm not thinking it. I'm doing a heavy critique. And I'm wondering why they're doing all of these things. I was very alert, even though I looked like a halfwit. From all these groups I was very deeply part of, I was doing the plutonic work. And I was seeing what utter fakes these people were on multiple levels. They redefined the word fake.
Your experience in terms of these different groups, people you've encountered over the years, you've obviously been able to see through the lies and the fucking bullshit. It's been the same thing on my end, even having been fucking recruited by some of these motherfuckers. And I'm like, no, I'm good. The trajectory in terms of what has developed on our end, in terms of the mystery school that's been created, correlates a reformation in terms of an occult. We're coming into the age of Aquarius. This is meant to be a new renaissance. And so the push on with the inversion and all these old systems and the Klingon, especially in terms of identity, all of the social dynamics and all of the issues are boiling and seething to the surface, man. It's like the Seder shamans of old. And what they don't want to happen is the actual activation of that soul spark essence in terms of the sun, metaphysically speaking. So taking it back to the original teachings, this, as far as what you're conveying, is what they actually meant to the law of correspondence, as above, so below. It's the exact same thing as it as within, as without. That which is within the center of the core of the earth, Mother herself, the central sun. At one time, the axis of the earth was at 90 degrees in alignment. And so this tilt, Eeyore Bach even mentioned, confirms this factor in terms of shattered consciousness. I take it back to the moon, I take it back to Maldek and Chiron, and a lot of other things that happened on the solar spiral of creation. So to the 3 spirals of creation, the Triskelion sigil of the Druids, like you're talking about, all of these things attributed and have lasted the fucking ages, but people still don't know the actual significance of what all this means, not only for us that know the difference, but for mankind in terms of the eternal birthright that belongs to all of us. All of this at one time sat at table. The Rosti Cross of the shaman, all race, tribes, and cultures at one time sat together in terms of the wisdom councils as I've conveyed over the years. So all of this for me ignited within my blood and bones, man. This is my Orlog. And a lot of the things that you covered over the years have confirmed, Michael, more than probably anybody else out there, man, as far as occult scholarship goes. And so far, me and Michael Tsarion here have gotten into some very interesting things that everybody out there needs to consider on the level. And as we continue to unpack the true mystery and ratio and equation in terms of what is unfolding in our reality field, crossing these thresholds is going to very well take place for those that have the eye to see and the ear to hear. I'm going to pull this segment into a break now. This is Seth Disposa, Black Earth Productions. We'll be right back after the break.
Your cause
are back. This is Seth Esposa, Black Earth Productions, Blue Flame, Healing Arts, and Occult Science here with Michael Tsarion. So as to continue with this segment, we could talk about psychology, I think, for an extensive amount of time, and I'd really like to have you back on, continue the flow here, really diving into the origins of evil and that specific dissertation. What was it that inspired you to even want to do that in the first place, man?
Coming out of Ireland after doing some studies in the megalithic stuff, realizing that there was a lie mechanism, I didn't need anybody in America to teach me that. I discovered it right in the field in Ireland, listening to these plonkers who were giving guided tours, completely seeing. And remember, there wasn't any major books out. We're talking about 82 up to 86. There wasn't anything except old style books, but I found those very, very helpful. And I kept them close even though they were deeply insufficient. Charles Squire, Celtic Myth and Legend, any of the fare that you could get out there, but particularly people like Jim Fitzpatrick, the Book of Conquest, these launched me off into a study of my own country. But because they were telling so many blatant lies about these buildings and structures and so on, and their astrological alignments, that's just for beginners, it became quite obvious that if you keep believing this mainstream stuff, you ain't going to get anywhere. I had to leave for America, and that's where my studies then really picked up, because you had the bookstores and you had the access freely to some amazing publishers like Health Research Publications, and many others I could mention. But to do with the origins of evil, it was a guy called Jack Barringer who just wrote a very, very slim book called Past Shock. Now, there had been a very famous, world famous book called Future Shock. It's not even on the same subject, but he had named his book Past Shock, and that got me intrigued. And I liked the cover because it had a Gustave Doré picture on the front, which I love Doré. I picked this up, and it turned out that Jordan Maxwell knew the guy. He was around. So reading books like Gods of Eden and all the things that I normally used to read, there was one line in Jack's book that changed my entire life. We've said in other programs, and just in passing, how 2 lines could change an empire or change the world. Well, forget about empires. My empire, my life was changed by just a couple of lines. And it just was ding, this eureka moment. Why has nobody thought that? Why has never ever read a book with this factoid in it, which is, if this world was wrecked by the kind of titanic cataclysms that other writers are talking about, as Zachariah Sitchin, Cummins Beaumont, the coming of the comet, whatever, then did these people just sit back in an armchair and after the wreckage of the earth just go back, putting things together again? Or was their own consciousness completely and utterly shattered? Right. You've got a fissure between the kind of consciousness we know now, and on the other side of this fissure, an ancient archaic thinking. We just mentioned it, the pre-Vedic Arya. Remember we said earlier that everything's a replication of what came later? The aristocracy, that word comes from Arya-stocracy. Well, you think that these Kissingers and DuPonts and the Queen of England, they're the aristocracy. There's an example. The real Arya was something completely aristocratic. Their hierarchies were benign. Their hierarchies were like a beehive. They were like an anthill. They were based on the hierarchy that exists already in our creation in a natural form called the moral universe, the cosmic order. In fact, the word cosmos means order. We only have relics of it. So then Jack's line about this psychological aspect, and I've been studying psychology for years, suddenly there was the connection between catastrophism and the other things I was interested in, the Celtic ruins and, hey, what was the bygone age like and what was the pre-Diluvian world like? It was always a subject, and then I had been studying this other subject over here. That line in that book, Past Shock, connected the two, and I've been going on it ever since. And luckily, Jack came to that Origins of Evil. Can you believe who came up to me? When I mentioned Jack to the crowd, said, you go get that book and you order it. And I was barely getting off stage, and this tall, gaunt man was standing at the back and goes, hi, I'm Jack Barringer. Now, I took that as a very, very powerful symbol. So glad to be able to have that moment to shake his hand. I said, man, you've started my career. I mean, I really have taken that seriously. I know the time and the place when I read that and how it impacted me, and something from within that was never planned. This was particularly the case, the idea to write the Atlantis book and how to form it and how to work it and bring all these Celtic elements, because it's really about the Celtic world, how to launch it, how to make it sensible, and how to put something in it that would last the test of time. Well, this is it. That man gave it to me. Oh my God, our psyches were rent. Our psyches were discombobulated. And the kind of ego consciousness we have now is a poor, faded shadow to what our ancestors knew, particularly, as I said, in the pre-Vedic. And that everything since that into the post-Vedic, post-Celtic has been a travesty. Yet, within the Arthurian legend, within the legends of Ireland that are Celtic or later. And of course, the Bach saga would be one of these things. And they themselves say that they're millions of years old. They have no, they don't make any bones about it. They say, fuck your chronologies. Right. And I believe them.
Right.
There is a knowledge of this planet, a relationship with this planet, with Udin Ma, the sun. Yes. And all of that, what they're bringing forth. Perhaps one could even say that even what they have is a late iteration, for goodness sake. Right in our DNA, in the real dark recesses of the unconscious, is the Aladdin's cave. My work is focused on one thing, if they want to understand it. It's about how you enter the mystery. That is the occult initiation.
How you enter the mysteries, right? The way that people approach, they think they're going to be able to swim in shallow water. For me, it took me at a very early age, looking up books on the gods and giants and fucking aliens and UFOs. Why the fuck is a kindergartner looking up, right? Things in terms of memory and codex. This is within our blood and bones. There's other people out there that are drawn to these things for a reason, but the main factor, like you're talking about, is a psychological factor. It all boils down to that. All of the problems and the issues and the fucking bullshit in the world are a psychological issue, right on down to the roots to how our thought and emotion operate, and also why we react and respond the way that we do.
That's a key part. Yeah. That's what Pluto represents. The crimes we've done to the secrets, the crimes we've done to ourselves as we pursue the truth or leave the truth down, which most people have done. So Pluto is the repository of the crimes we've done against ourselves, not towards others. That's different. That's Mars. That's justice. It's a different element there. But the Plutonic in its purest aspect, to understand it, is to understand crimes against the moral universe. Because we have a moral universe, initiators in journey, Path of the Fool or the monomyth, but nobody gives a shit about it. Registered as crimes against the self, crimes against the mystery, capitalized. Therefore, everyone who doesn't go on the journey, they can't sit hiding in their little Track 29 bird box and watching big screen TV. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get away with it. And you know it. That's why you got conscience.
Right. Once the process takes people, I remember when it took me and my level of passion for the actual fucking truth itself ignited beyond what I could even say. And I never could have imagined that things would have developed the way that they have. Again, in terms of everything, we could talk about psychology till probably the day we potentially wither, but I don't think that we're going to fucking wither. I think that the legacy of the ancestors and everything that's been implemented, I can only really speak for myself, but I'm going to continue to drive this full on. And the level of effect that it's had on many, many people that have actually taken the initiation, this is a lifelong initiation. It doesn't just happen in one session or one reading or one trial or fucking upheaval. This is going to continue in terms of that Plutonian energy of transformation, taking the alchemical rites of initiation. This is the hero's quest, where in terms of the path and your dissertation and that whole series, I take that to be the path of Odin itself, as he sought wisdom and then achieved the level of hermits to the hanged man and death and all these different things that we touch upon, invited me onto the Unslaved podcast, how they took the symbolism and inverted it and then turned it into religion. And this is not how the fuck it used to be. And so to reinstate the original teaching and bring things forth in alignment has been the goal on my end. Of course, there's a lot of other things that I'm going to touch upon and get into in the future. But things to Odin Ma, the Arctic homeland, you did a whole thing on this. What is the psychological factor to that?
First of all, we need to get rid of the word we, or one of the underlying forms of mysteria, that there is such a thing as we. There's only the we in terms of a collective consciousness. The we doesn't mean anything to spiritual man for many reasons. One is that your journey is your own. That's the most obvious. People start to realize that as they go on the ideographic path. And secondly, you're in some sense violating the sovereignty and the freedom of another person to even try to open up. You know, I've just written another article on personalism. I laid out some of the tenets in that article. It's found on the michaeltsarion.com site. In a broader context, like we were talking about Jack Barringer, when the thing that was very, very strong for me when those two forms came together, those two studies, is that it's obvious that everyone needs to know about that in the narrative. In the upper systems, in the conscious world, when rugs are pulled, or any kind of trauma occurs, now it has to be something that occurs multiple times. Otherwise, what I'm going to say just doesn't work. The traumas that we experience in the upper world do happen all the time. Look at the news media. With the law of resonance, those upper states of trauma, should they happen too frequently? Governments make sure they do happen frequently. The dragon below is awakened. But your Edward Bernays types know all about it. The CFR knows all about it. The deep state, those forces know how to make not just physical money out of it and all the rest of it, but they know how to keep us enslaved. They want our focus to be on news headlines. Starving children here,
Right.
the poor gays who need their rights over there, and women, I got to get adjusted to that. Where's my pot belly and my stringy legs and plaid shirt? And I got to get with this. This is happening in our world. The thing is, they don't understand is this deep reservoir of trauma below. They're not psychologically aware enough, nor is anyone else in America. They may hear the words of it. That's all it is. It's just a bunch of words. They're not going to take it to heart. The kickoff point is to understand and study this deep trauma. Velikovsky called it the historical amnesia. That's what I've been studying all my life. It's central to everything. It's central to my experiences growing up in Ireland and Belfast. It's certainly central to why there's abusive people in the world and why there's criminal people in the world and all the rest of it. So if you don't have this plugged in to the war game, you can be a 5-star general. Your war games are rubbish.
Right. It's like Sun Tzu stated in The Art of War. If you don't know thyself and know thy enemy, you're completely fucked.
It's hopeless. You can build your walls high.
Right.
They're not walls at all. So there is actually subjects pertinent to knowledge of the collective that might help people individuate from the collective. The collective is by definition a cluster of the horde of pigeons against the very thing I'm talking about. The great oceans and tides of the trauma is out there. The echoes of the discombobulation and the fragmentation of the psyche. And so the very collective, all the things on the top that you study, and I've been studying now for years to confirm the points I'm making. They're not spurious. These manifestations, this phenomena on the top, you have to start seeing with new eyes. And all of this, even this multicultural nonsense, it's all boiled down to this underlying trauma, manipulated by government forces to facilitate their agendas. Well, yeah, of course, now that you've got the mass where you need it, you can move it to the right and to the left. It's like one of those little games with a mercury ball.
It's just
swing to the left, swing to the right, and all the rest of it.
Right. And it stays in that closed loop system in terms of this. Like I've stated over the fucking years, this triangulation factor that's happening within the etheric realm. And this is why people need to know psychology, but even deeper in terms of the occult, what psychosomatics actually fucking is. And they want to keep us in that trauma-based mind control on an unconscious level. You're not even fucking aware that you're operating in terms of this, your attitude, the way you fucking think, the way that you act, and all of these things in terms of psychological projections, not wanting to face the self, which is what true initiation is all about, is facing that magic mirror gates. And there's a lot of different depictions of this. One of the main ones that really comes out to me is that scene with Frodo and Galadriel when he offers her the ring. And then she sees herself as the fucking monster. That temptation of power that would totally fucking consume her, as the parasite has with so many tyrants throughout the fucking centuries. People, these petty tyrants, domestic situations, a whole bunch of fucking shit that continues to play itself out. They want to keep us triangulated and locked down into that state of fucking mind. And I'm here to declare that there is a path work to break through this, but it's going to force you to face your pain. It's going to force you to face shit you might not even know is there in terms of the alchemical rites and initiation. So the actual transformation, again, going back to Pluto, right? This Plutonian power, we've been conditioned to avoid it and be terrified of it. The avoidance, the dance around the void, instead of bridging the rift and sealing off the fucking abyss into black hole fucking oblivion. That's what the fuck people are running to. It's absolute fucking insanity, Michael. People flip the fucking script. Even individuals that seemingly knew the difference into old patterns. For me, it doesn't make any fucking sense because the conviction is so fucking strong otherwise. How the fuck is that even possible, psychologically speaking?
There's not a person I know who hasn't fallen back in the old patterns. They've got confession, exercising the sin on the platonic level. Well, what the fuck? Do it in piecemeal. The false systems have co-opted, right? Psychology, what do you think psychology is on its worst day? Is exactly this. Yeah. Come and confess, and we'll give you a nice spring clean on the top. So one has to understand that as well, that many of the techniques of psychology are just no more than the confessional. The great Otto Rank was warning the world about this, and so did Thomas Szasz later on. You have a worry here because this Plutonic stuff has built up. People say, well, why is it only coming to the surface now? Because you've had innumerable false simulations of it right down the line, just to blow your nose, pat you on the head, blow your nose, come on, into the hanky. You're feeling better now? A couple of Hail Marys, out you go.
And nothing's ever fucking resolved. Nothing ever gets healed. Nothing's ever moved through, and they continue to rule and reign.
Correct.
And this whole concept of at one-ment, the whole idea that we are one is bullshit. Bullshit. We're not even at one with ourselves. How could we be one with another person that doesn't even know who the fuck they are?
Yeah, these are these mysteria I was telling you about. There's no one thing in the world. Every snowflake and every leaf is different. They're talking about fucking oneness. Take them in the dark over to a nice cliff and just go, keep walking. Unslaved is all about that. What is it about in us that we buy lies? It goes back to 1980 when I was thinking this stuff. What is it about the collective that buys the lies? We've already answered it. It's ancestral trauma. Of course, it's different for different people, obviously. This is a very, very idiographic thing. But in general, when you're talking about mass movements, that ancestral trauma is not awakened unless there is a continual, repetitive traumatization on the surface level. And we see that phenomenologically. You can prove it on the top. And now more and more people are seeing, wait a minute, if he's wrong, then why is there this constant shaking of the rug? When the Berlin Wall fell, we should have had peace. When such and such happened, we should have had peace. But we still have the cancers in our bodies, and they told us that would be all sorted. And breakfast TV went into orbit about being healthy. Does anybody look healthy today? You've had all your different commercials and infomercials about sports gear, 1,000 commercials out there and infomercials about some weight gear or some other product. Look at the girth size of people all around us. You see evidence that there's no progress, only regress. And one of the actions of Pluto, not just Pluto, but Uranus as well, is to make it so damn obvious before the shitstorm comes down. You're not going to be able to say, I didn't know. Not one of you, no matter what kind of a lunatic, half-brained hipster with your brains dripping out your fucking nose into your cappuccinos, well, I didn't see it coming. It's making it bloody obvious. And some of the people that jump up, they're doing plutonic work. Not to the level you and I would fucking want, but from a collective point of view,
well,
you
it's
know,
not right. It's not even necessarily to the level that I fucking wanted in terms of my own experience, but it happens anyway. Going back to the main factor, people have been conditioned to avoid this at all fucking costs, psychologically speaking. So when it boils up, when they experience, say, the seething, boiling forth, and all of this comes in the waking consciousness, they haven't taken actual initiation to be able to navigate consciousness in terms. And so all of that fear, cling on to that false identity, that's the shamanic death. So fucking terrified. We've also been conditioned to avoid and be afraid of who the fuck we truly are in the face of all this shit. As far as I'm concerned, the human race has existed millions of years, like Eeyore Bach has stated, and being able to look into the records in terms of my own codex activations, and then from there doing research and study, extensive research and study to be able to verify. You're absolutely 100% in terms of everything that you're saying. Look at the world right now. Since what hit in 2020, it has been a regression, not an advancement, not an evolution, a fucking goddamn regression. And for what?
There's not an occult principle in the deepest archives that you're not seeing in plain view. Most people never make a connection, but I can make it as a statement. There's no esoteric tradition that is not in plain view in the world today.
What exactly do you mean by that, though?
The cliff off, the shells, you're surrounded by them.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks there's a mighty occult thing. Mighty occult thing, go down to the frickin' mall. There are the shells. There are the dead souls. There are the empty ones. They're the fucking orcs. Get it?
Right. Exactly.
You know, and the sickness of it. And just because it's institutionalized, government is really doing nothing in one level. It's the pus within people and the sins toward the self that is the real matrix of sin that the church later co-opted in their version of sin. But it's always collectivized.
Right.
You know, us sinning against God. But I just told you there was no God. There was only the sun, and you can't sin against the sun, believe you me. You can't sin against Mother Nature before Mother Nature will bitch slap you into kingdom come. The whole Christian thing, what it was doing essentially was trying to co-opt the sin of man against his own being, shutting himself off from reality. We live in our ideas about ideas. That's mysteria. And those ideas or concepts, as people would know them, are not, in fact, articulated to two percepts. The traditional idea is that your percepts, meaning just ordinary vision, sensual vision of the objects around you, entities around you, is meant to give rise to your concepts. George Berkeley, the Irish philosopher in the 1600s, put paid to that. And of course, then to avoid what he had taught, they shifted gears to other things he taught so they could ridicule and lampoon him. The real things that he taught, which is what this percept and concept, and I'll be getting into it in other programs as we go down the line, was his mark of genius to show you that everything that you think about in terms of registration of the world, you know, he was an idealist, making a case for the role of the mind. Blake, and people are going, will you get started yet? Blake is faulting idealists for not making more of the mind. Yeah. He thinks they're too light. They're too still close to materialism. And then one of the other things that the non-religious person has sheltered themselves in, incubated themselves in, is the materialism. So it takes somebody like a Blake to have seen that. Over here, you got religious man whose idealism isn't going far enough. You've got your well-meaning religious types. They're in a fucking mess because all they've got is cannibalized hermeticism from centuries and, like you say, even millennia. I believe that. And then you've got your non-religious person who's got the dogma of scientism. Well, it's just the complexity. It's just the complexity of all the systems that make up your brain and your nervous system. Don't you see it's very complex? Well, that's it. And this, because of that complexity, you get this thing called mind. When have you last learned in your book that complexity comes out of simplicity? Isn't the system below complexity more complex? And your own science has proven it. The finest mathematicians you put on the job, 3 of them went mad and the other 2 shot themselves.
Right.
Because they couldn't fucking face what their own mathematics had shown them of the deep complexity.
Right.
Okay, we just used the word subatomic level right now, but people get what we mean. Oh, then they come up with, no, Michael, sure, you're wrong. It's black matter. It's black energy. You mean spirit. You just don't want to use the word. It's the noumena. It's the cosmic order. It's the moral universe. It's Walter Russell's light and gravity. Black matter now. Oh, well, sure, that's right. The galaxies were like omelets. They just fly out. There's not enough gravity to hold any bodies together. They would just split. They would just fly to the wall, like Mercury, you know. Go, oh, so it's black matter now, black energy. Fuck, what a discovery, right? They'll do anything, then it'd say, well, no, that's the spirit. We have no clue what it is. It's the ambient moral universe that holds 2 atoms together, let alone anything else, or the photon, or whatever way you want to look at it. But then you've had scientists who've gone along to prove that fact. They have done it. Rupert Sheldrake, right? They want to silence them. They're even being shadow banned, for Christ's sake. My answer to the fact that of materialism, which is no, mind is just an epiphenomena, a ghost in the machine of the utter complexity. An epiphenomena, spark, some weird phenomena we can't, and it has no reality, so let's not talk about it. No, as Schelling and Hegel and these people showed, any complexity, if you could point to it, comes from a greater complexity, not less below. Right. Complex systems do not grow out of simplistic. And Ken Wilber, this has all been proven. All of this shows that it is more complex below, but it's a complexity that your stinking materialistic mind cannot fathom. You see it as simple, or you reduce. That's called reductionism. That's why the word is used, because you have to reduce it. Well, look, any brain box should know. If I see the watch, the complex Swiss watch rolling up on the beach, I open it up and see all its complexity. I don't immediately think of simplicity creating it, do I? It has to be something more complex. Now they've accepted it in emergence theory and all these other, but they're doing it behind the scenes. The public doesn't know. You have to, like I say, do your homework and find out that they are now absolutely aware of the greater complexity below, but they will always defer and use nomenclature that leads you in another direction. Black matter. I mean, what the hell is that? Look at the duplicity.
It's all across the board, man. And things to the origins of evil and diving into these concepts and really wanting to know the fucking cause, taking it to the poison root. I've done work that has taken it to the poison root. I had to go into that shit though. And it really takes a lot of great courage to not only come to that place of being aware, go through that process of integration, taking the alchemical rites of initiation to expand not only your awareness, but consciousness in order to be able to navigate personal psychology, understanding psychological factors. I had a position as a professional psychologist in the secular world, and I had to leave that fucking shit because these motherfuckers didn't get it, man. The power that's actually truly there within us that we can tap into without understanding, again, a need for reformation in all these areas. This is the age that we're coming into, an age of reformation, an age of upgrade. It makes total sense to me, Michael, why they would have done what they did and really amplify and ramp this shit the fuck up as they are continuing to do. You don't watch television? I don't watch television either, man. You get me on some fucking commercials, man, I'm going to front kick that motherfucker across the room. You know what I'm saying? You know, what the fuck's your problem, man? Well, if you knew what the fuck I knew, you would understand why I'm being the way that I am. And they tell you to tone it the fuck down. No, we're going to ramp this up because if we tone it the fuck down, we're just going to be led to the slaughter like everybody else. And it's happening. People are fucking dying out there. Psychologically, physically, mentally, emotionally. Their temporal existence has been challenged. In terms of network and having you come on Black Earth Productions, I want this to be a mile mark in terms of the progression of what's going to start unfolding from here going into 2022. We're about to come into the Phoenix cycles in terms of the procession. The collective has been going through this massive blackening stage, getting the chance to actually face their fucking shit. Otherwise, they're just going to get pulled into that AI timeline. I don't know if you've touched upon anything in terms of the White Dragon prophecy, and there are 2 main timelines that are playing out in terms of the procession. People are going to go the fucking AI, or they're going to systematically come back onto the original timeline. The awakening of the ancestors kicked off in 2017. That solar eclipse that happened in September was very, very powerful, and we got our timeline all of the hyperdimensional warfare and the shit that I faced, all the fucking upheaval leading up to this present moment to where I'm at right now has been totally fucking worth it because of what's starting to be implemented and what's developing on our end. And there is a lot more that's going to be coming, not only here on Black Earth Productions, but what's going to manifest in terms of network and all of the connections that are going to continue to take place, bringing everything of a major reformation, not only in terms of the occult, but our world. And the question is, which timeline are you on? Are you going to catch it, or are you going to allow the further enslavement of yourself, of your children, of your family, of your city, state, country, our world? We here at Black Earth Productions hail the birthright, because I'm here to state again, this is what belongs to you, and you have to take it. You have to own it. You have to become the idea. This is the becoming. This is Seth Gizboza, Black Earth Productions, Blue Flame, Healing Arts and Occult Science. Me and Michael Tsarion will be back after the break. We are back now from the break. This is Seth Esposa, Black Earth Productions, Blue Flame. Healing Arts and Occult Science here with the legend MSAR himself, Michael Tsarion from the Unslaved Podcast. And now to continue with our commentary. Some other things I wanted to touch upon. The importance of the occult arts and sciences coming again to the forefront as they were in times past, taken to the ancients. This for me is when the ancient wisdom councils existed before all this shit went down and the betrayals that took place, wars between Samaria and Egypt, where magic again became corrupt. We talked about this on the Slave Podcast. What does magic actually mean to you, Michael?
Magic is something that has the ability to affect you simultaneously on all the four levels: emotionally, intellectually, intuitively, and physically. Right away, you can tell that that's very few things. Music would top.
Absolutely.
And art, like Schopenhauer said, life is fucking meaningless unless you have those. Others have unpacked art as a way to express a deep emotion. It's a way for us to vehicleize and exercise the ancestral trauma, which of course must be central, because the more you exercise it, the less effect it has upon you. If you look around the world, what is actually really happening? A lie is burning down. You expect me to fucking be crying about it? America's based on a goddamn fucking lie, as most of the world is. I'm celebrating the fucking fact that it's burning. Sinned against the alphas. Right, all these plonkers running around, they're the ones. The whole of the left used to be the liberals. They supported the alpha. Where have you got that now? They're threatened by the alpha man.
Right.
So the magic
Bunch
is
of fucking
there.
Pussies, man. That's what I
right. So the magic is still there, but it's going to be restricted to a great work. It's something that is an idiosyncratic thing. The magic is really your magic, and that's why it can happen spontaneously every second of every day. If you're looking for a collective version of it, well, again, it's shrink wrapped. It can only come in one shape and form, and it is for everyone. And hey, don't knock me. We get that. A special concert by somebody who's pouring their fucking guts out of their life work on the classical guitar or the sitar or piano, or a great movie like American Beauty that is definitely a magical experience for many. Magic is not stingy. It gives of itself freely. When you're dealing with the noumena, the moral universe, is it doesn't stint. The sun doesn't say, well, you're going to get my beams and you asshole are not. There's a pleroma, there's an abundance. The rose is not only beautiful in and of itself, but it gives even a perfume, which is an extra, says Conan Doyle. The moral universe exudes only the good. And as I say, we have sinned against it. I'm using that word in a different context. The sin is not a collective one. The sin is that you prefer to be caught up in the problem, the problematic, as it's called in philosophy, because whatever solution that you ever find to a problem, solving cancer or fixing an engine or a turbine, these are fixes that are applicable mechanically then to all other problems of the similar kind. We've become addicted to the problematic, decoding an ancient script, neuroscience, even the most smallest idea of how to build a more sustainable building or whatever. Our world is so littered in this idea of the problematic, in which our function then is to excel. They'll put us through a school. You learn a set of methods to fix something. Say you're in biology or you're into health or a psychologist. The beauty of it is that we now can take those few sets of corrections and apply them across the board. And that gives us our role. Like a M.C. Escher painting, all these little homunculi running around with their buckets and their spanners. And most of the human race are only too happy to conform, because if you look at Escher's actual message, that's a square. That's something that's very comforting. These paths lead nowhere in a confined space. And that's that response to ancient trauma. I have a job. I've got my overalls. I've got my spanner, my gauges and my gadgets and my test tubes. And so I'm going to live within this very confined space and not look out to anything mysterious. I don't want the mystery at all anywhere near me, because no fixes. When the mystery presents problems, there are problems of a completely different sort that are not in any way fixed by a problematic self. You have to go into a different mode of selfhood completely to even deal with that issue. And again, the church replicated that. The church sits on the alignment between the problematic and the mysterious to shut you down. They talk about the great mystery, but it's always anthropomorphized. It's always your 15 steps for the Catholic Church.
You're at the goddamn fucking threshold, man. You got a bunch of fucking kindergartners in terms of spirituality, but don't know jack fucking shit. I remember getting kicked out of fucking Sunday school, man, questioning the teacher when they brought up Noah's Ark. I was like, that's bullshit. And I got fucking wrung out into the middle of the fucking hall, man, by my fucking shirt. Threw me out, and she said, never come back to my class. And I stood there. Tyranny. And I stood there fucking confused. I was like, what the fuck was that? I was like 4 or 5 years old, man. And it still hasn't fucking changed in terms of this psychological factor and the lockdown and the distortions and the overlays and the programming that are keeping all of this in place. And so the shakeup of that power of the Plutonian energy, this is what the fuck Scorpio is. And I am a quadruple Scorpio. So it never worked on me. I can't speak for other people out there, but this is why I hold the attitude that I fucking do. I'm a fucking warrior shaman. Held legacy from listening to your works over the years. There's things that you have presented that have absolutely profoundly changed my life forever. And I know it's been like that with a lot of people out there. This is that state of mind in terms of triangulation that they want to keep everyone into. It's not going to stand for those that are going the original timeline trajectory. In terms of the AI, I got a little taste of what was coming back in the year 2000. And if I were to actually convey what I saw in vision and all this different stuff that I experienced, people think they know torment. People think they know fear or pain. They have no fucking clue, man, what's on the other end of the equation if they don't wake the fuck up. So doing everything we can to inspire other people, because again, like we said before on the last time you had me on, if they don't come on their own accord, it's not authentic. It's not some kind of inquisition here where we are forcing people to even give a fuck about anything that we're doing, but hopefully inspiring the importance so that people look into it and then the authentic process takes them. And going back to magic and my take on magic, going back to a personal magic, like you said, that's the real magic that they don't want us to tap into. And it's not some fucking egregore in terms of a group dynamic and then you're part of some fucking cult. You're tapping into your own codex. You're tapping into your own mechanics and systems of navigation. This, for me, as far as I'm concerned, is foundation. We're talking about music. You are a musician, a brilliant musician, by the way. Your albums that you put out, share with everyone, because your music, I throw that on. I go places with that music, highly, highly unique in terms of your style. It truly is magic as far as I'm concerned. You created.
We have Temple of the Eclipse, Sun Magic, Star Magic, Crown of Oberon. They were about 130 pieces.
Yeah, amazing.
Think about how to present it to the public. It was time to put these out. There's a lot of reluctance, to tell you the truth. I had a personal crisis about it. But I thought, what the hell? You know, because I've been in bands and I have other musical projects on the way. But these, I thought, look, why don't I just get these out? I can know where to find them and maybe redo them later on or whatever, you know, but at least start a pattern of getting them out in this form. And then we can do something different, you know, down the line. So it looked like it was a productive move. It was much more pragmatic. They're all unique pieces. It started earnestly in 1990 when there was a big fuck up in my life, you know, as far as the band format, who betrayed me and just betrayed the band, betrayed the music. So then I was left in a very, very bad state in the sense of being lost in America, I think might be the term we're looking for. I was living in a house where there was this very old beat up Gibson. You can see it on the website, MSAR Music, right on the homepage of that guitar. That was lying with a gigantic crack. And I started moving into that style of playing. And then the open tuning thing came along. I do have a page which shows some of these earlier guitarists who played in that style.
Everybody out there, get a hold of Michael Tsarion's music. It truly is magic. A lot of the things that we've been able to touch upon today, the importance of what is unfolding, and everybody out there getting the actual opportunity to tap into your own system mechanics and magics and purpose and alignment to counter strike everything that's happening in the reality field and really step it the fuck up and start communicating more, start expressing more, start doing more creative things, start doing more healthy things, and not get so wrapped up. Yeah, face your fucking shit. We all got to face our shit. And the men out there, stop being a bunch of fucking pussies and acting like fucking toddlers. You know, I can deal with this fucking shit. I don't tolerate it now, especially at the age that I'm at. I've been through enough. And you obviously, at your age, man, I mean, I can't even imagine probably what you were thinking in terms of what hit. Seriously, man, this is a hyperdimensional war. And we have to be warriors as men. And there's different ways that we fight. There's different ways that we strategize.
We were inured to it by living in Belfast 30 years. Yeah. Actually, it goes a lot more, but the actual bombings and the fight, you know, the street fighting and the killings and the murders of children and women and kneecappings and all the terroristic, you know, Man Unleashed happened in 1969, 1970, 30 bombs in a tiny little town like Belfast going off in one day. Graveyards just jam-packed with the bodies of police and army, young men who most of them were not even politically inclined and had no reason to die. My own family in Ireland was traumatized by this. Everybody was. You couldn't but hear of a local family that had been, you know, paramilitaries had busted in, shot them in front of their children in their beds.
Fucking
And this
insane.
went on, for 30 years. Huge bomb attacks, constant blockades. America still doesn't have a clue about it. If you try to go shopping in town, you should find some Irish people from Northern Ireland who'll tell you what it was like to have to just go into a shop. The deep searches that were done on multiple occasions, not only at the shop, but they had a perimeter around the whole town. And you had to go through a whole procedure of unpacking all your bags, shopping bags, your boot of your car, your clothes. By the time you were finished shopping, the town was closing.
Wow.
We used to remember this time and time again. And often a bomb would be driven through, and you're having a dinner or you go to a shop, and the next thing you know, kaboom! It was mayhem. Streets disappears in front of your fucking eyes, and casualties all over the bloody place. All of them innocent. I can't even think of a time when actually anybody who was involved in any negative activity. Of course, this doesn't talk about the police and army who were slaughtered.
Right.
I mean, there are many thousands. Ordinary civilians usually were the victims. So, I come to America and see this. It's
a fucking joke, man.
Word to that bullshit,
Right. A lot of the things that are even happening in other places of the world right now, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, what is this actually going to fucking boil down to? Is it going to be all out fucking war? Some people assume that. But again, the art of fighting without fighting, knowing how to war on an etheric level, because everything is a triangulated closed loop system in terms of what they're implementing to psychosomatics. And with the media and the propaganda and the very ancient system of mind control that first sprang up in terms of religion, it's still there. Everything that we're dealing with in this world is nothing new. And as far as I'm concerned, Michael, they are doing the exact same fucking thing that they did in Atlantis in terms of genetic modification. The DNA, the RNA, the script. This is all the fuck they have. Okay, what do we have? Well, we have something way more powerful, way more potent, and it's our connection to that ignition of that soul spark, like you were talking about, taking it back millions of years. And so I'm seeing this dynamic. I can see it on timelines. I can see it on many different ways and spectrums. And realizing that the real war that we're all facing is the one truly within ourselves. It does boil down to the individual and diving into this for real and wanting to know, and then seeking that, and then finding people like myself and you. There are other people out there that are going through this process and they have no fucking clue because everybody else around them is caught up in the nets, right? And they're getting out. And so this path work is very difficult. It's very challenging, but it's also very rewarding on the other end of the equation once you actually get through some of this shit and start connecting with people that are going where the fuck you were going. Was there any point in time where you were just calm and you're like, I'm fucking done?
Well, yes and no, because nobody could do this work without at the one time being very conscious of what's going on with other people who are not conscious of it, right? They're still living their mediocre lives.
Yeah.
And when you're upstairs at the highest balcony looking down and seeing the vista, you are going to be absorbed in that war game, and you're going to be saying, maybe I can't do any more. But every time I have that experience, I'm always thinking of the main thing that I got into this for is, of the mentors of the past and keeping their names alive. And so I just carry on doing that without getting bothered. I'm very stoic, and anything that you cannot control, if you're not part of the narrative in there and nobody's coming to you to ask you about what happens on Capitol Hill, then fucking great. If they do come, you get on Tucker Carlson calling you one day, go, right, I'll go on Tucker Carlson and do my thing. The thing I'm not stoical about is making sure that graves are attended. That's my personality type. Rain or shine, storm or fair weather, those wreaths will be on those tombs and in cenotaphs. And so my job is already cut out for me, and therefore is already beyond good and evil. That job and that role is assigned to me, and I'm doing it thick and thin. There's nothing in the world, what it does or what explosions are taking place or who's cutting whose throats has any bearing on my job and my duty. It's a vocation. I've said that from day one. I've never had a recreation. I've never had an occupation. I only have vocation. I don't come from any other line of work. That's the difference between me and anybody else in this movement. I only come from the occult world. I haven't been involved with any other profession at all, not even music. That really kicked in for me in 1990.
So everything that you've been doing since you came on is what you have been doing with your life.
Yeah.
Period.
Yep. Since 9 years old, at least. I was studying William Blake since I was 5 years old. People don't even believe that. I have a good laugh. Yeah. No way. The search, if you want to call it, you are being sort of led. See, I have a lot of other interests that I've never been able to make public. Things that were indelible to me as a child growing up, like etymology, and some of that has become public. But I have a deep interest in language and other things. It's like a conveyor belt. So I have been interested in those subjects, and they only now and again get a role in what I may be doing professionally. The main thing is I don't come from any other world, even in terms of ancestry. There was a lot of weird stuff going on even in my family, but I just look at it from the people that I knew, because also by being into those mysteries, there was a great temptation to be waylaid within these different paths that I've been involved in, or the New Age movement in general, as one would say. As you put it, it's more the danger that I got entrapped in some sort of cult or sect and then became a spokesman, a priest, or some authority, within that hierarchy. And this could be like somebody would be caught in masonry or whatever. But these spiritual paths, if you do well, if you're an adept, it's very, very simple to get caught. But I'm far, far too much of an individual for any of that. And also, really, it's the people who were such plonkers, they made it impossible. From my point of view, these people were so loathsome. They are their own worst advertisement, the people in the New Age movement. Many of them was in my own family or extended family. I mean, these people were such utter, greedy, narcissistic, abusive, tyrannical fucking types that there is absolutely no way that I would be recruited on any permanent basis. I hated them. I absolutely fucking hated them. But you're young, you're in your early teens. There's no way that you can express that. So you just burn with it inside. I wanted to get away from them, yeah. But it's not that I wanted to get away from the pursuit of the truth or doing a vocational kind of work. No, I like it. Because then I do have my recreations, like in music on the side or something like that. I can make do. And I've never asked for anything in this life that is outlandish or bizarre or in some way, who the hell do you think you are? I feel very fulfilled by what I'm doing because I love to penetrate into the minds of the alpha men, the great wisdom, and learn. I'm always a pupil more than a teacher. I'm only interested in keeping the names of the greats like me alive and bringing them forth to the table, but never inciting anybody to say, you're going to fucking study.
Right.
And that's why my career has been so difficult. That's why I've been hinterlanded by almost everybody in the movement. I've never been mentioned publicly by people who should definitely be mentioning my work, including a lot of thieves of my fucking work. I've had a really rough ride, but I don't care because these people are loathsome to me. And I know every single part of why they don't want to touch it, because it is psychological, because it is founded in an old ancient tradition.
Right.
And these are the guys who came from other areas. Think of everybody in this movement. They all came from other areas, no matter how they tried to disguise it. And I don't need their accolades at all. And that's why I've never worked with them. In the early days, I placated it. It's not that I, from the start, was any kind of person who wouldn't interrelate. No, I came in completely open. And it's only after I saw what you're greeted by and what is out there, I made what I consider extremely rational and clever moves to say, doing my own thing.
I experienced the exact same thing when I came public again. All the fucking bullshit, drama, and jockeying and fighting and positioning, and I'm the fucking God complex fucking bullshit is what I've seen. And that, as far as I'm concerned, one of the greatest detriments. Because like you just said, you are positioning yourself to be the eternal student. And only there you can evolve. Only there you can expand. Only there you can really, truly thrive and travel and see and integrate. Always in that place of knowing that there's more than what's been implemented, what's been revealed. And it's going to continue. This is an eternal art and science as far as I'm concerned. Everything converges here in Midgard. This is where we truly ascend. Some of us didn't have to come here to that notion of past incarnation. I've been here before. I really think that you've been here before. You're looking at this whole situation like it's just a fucking joke to me. What the fuck?
You have to realize it's esoteric.
Yeah.
And it's not exoteric. Why do you think I've never been on the History Channel? Do you know how many times they've contacted me? You'd laugh. Gaia, you wouldn't believe how many times these kinds of groups. I went on once to check it out. Quest for Atlantis was the show. It was a sci-fi channel. I did that. The experience was so pathetic. They leave all of your stuff on the cutting room floor. I'm the kind of person that you will never see me again. You violate my knowledge once and you will never see me again. You can throw millions at me. And that's what I've done. I've never said this before in public, but I've been contacted by those kinds of groups multiple times. Multiple times. I don't even answer them back. I don't even say thank you for your email. That should tell you then what I think of any of these mainstream groups. They're more a hindrance than help. So until somebody comes along and does a more respectful treatment, I'm not interested. I do what we do on the Unslaved podcast. We've got this guy called Alan Denny. Wait till you see what he's got to bring.
Okay.
Alan Denny is coming up in a few weeks. I mean, I'm thrilled about that, to find mavericks like myself, people who have got extraordinary thesis. They're coming from all different walks of life. I don't give a damn about the mainstream. The mainstream to me is just garbage. And my closest followers know that. So Coming back to the astrology, you see, you have the Uranian energy in Taurus. Uranian energy is hanging around Taurus. That can mean several things. One is that the entire system can completely go haywire because the people demand it. Secondly, on the lower level, it's gangland. And one thing about America that's always been one of its possibilities is the rule of the mob. The gangs just hit the streets. And this is one of the other ways that America comes down. Now, somebody say, yeah, we've already seen that, Michael. No mystery. No, I'm talking about making that look like child's play. And Iranian energy hanging around Taurus is just about as bad as plutonic energy hanging around Capricorn. And then, as you said, if this plutonic energy moves into the public sign of Aquarius, it is war. You mentioned war, and I didn't get a chance to mention it, but I'm doing it now. War is very, very much part of this future possibilities. But before it becomes a war, it's more likely to be a gang war. And there's precedence for that. Go back to the First and Second World War. After the British Empire knew it had to retreat from some of these colonies, look what it did. It purposely put people who hated themselves and had feuds going back thousands of years. It made sure to place them nearby. It made them share territories, knowing that this was a powder keg. This is an official historical study, by the way. Northern Ireland, putting the Republicans right next door in places like Londonderry and Belfast, Catholics and Protestants right across the street from each other. Do you think just because none of those two contingents knew that this was an old geopolitical strategy, that it made it any less a fact? In America, all the influx of blow-ins and cave crawlers from God knows where, and it's happening every day. You can get hundreds of thousands of dollars if you was inconvenienced. Well, they chaperoned you across the border, and all this palaver that America's just sitting there and accepting. Have you any idea that that's rolling out a very old thing? Not that Whitey is going to be in trouble. No, these gangs coming in all hate each other. All the immigrants that are being brought in back in their own countries, they absolutely fucking hate each other and have had feuds for hundreds and hundreds of years. And now that all that's happening is the geopoliticians up there are moving them into America as the new battleground. Right. You give these people money and homes. That's just the honeymoon period. When that dies away, these different immigrant groups are going to go to the throats. They're not at home in America. It's like being, in Sweden.
It's a fucking cauldron of shit.
Yeah.
And nobody knows who the fuck we are.
Poly-fucking-glot.
Nobody knows.
Multicultural nightmare.
Nobody knows who the fuck they are. We've all been cut off from our fucking roots. Yeah. And for me, in terms of ignitions, actually experiencing interface with them, observing the records within my fucking bones and my blood. This is the real here in terms that I'm talking about. This is the crux in terms of the main psychological factor. And you've said it as well. Cut a man off from his roots and you will have a fucking slave.
And they've taken groups like the Native American who have full sovereignty. They can carry guns. They can arm themselves to the fucking teeth. They're driving around in limos. They're making their own money tax-free.
They got the fucking casinos, man. Who do you think?
It's all tax-free. And they have much more protection than even that. They are literally nations within nations. Why can't any group in America say, we want the same protections, the same sovereignty? One is they don't pursue it, but it would be denied them even if they tried, wouldn't it?
Fucking action in terms of any of this. I love doing segments and I love getting on and creating and putting out teachings. It's the actions that we are taking that is going to determine the future of our kind. What we do matters. It's not like we can just sit back and let this fucking parade of bullshit, this cauldron, boil over, man. I'm not going to allow it in my own life. I can't speak for anybody else. But when it comes to my sovereignty and my state of mind, I will not fucking allow it. And if people want to go there, okay, let's go. Let's have a good time. Let's raise a glass of wine, like you said before, to the universe and celebrate our existence and actually take this opportunity instead of acting like a bunch of little fucking whiny bitches, giving away our power. That's another factor. I can't stand that, man. And exposing all of this for what the fuck it is, what would you say is beyond? Again, like I was asking earlier, what do you think that we need to actually implement here? What is it going to take for people to cross this threshold that we are all standing at in terms of the procession?
People need to fortify their psychic sovereignty. Society is one of the worst aberrations anybody could ever have. And if they want to know all about that, they can go to Ayn Rand and some of the greatest people that have ever lived on our planet to dissect it for them. There's many. When it comes to solutions, I only have to repeat again what I've said many times before, and that is address this ancestral trauma, at least intellectually, you know that it's there. And then you can understand why your enemy does certain things the way it does it from on high. Then in your personal life, you have to then stay close to the masters. Find out who are the greatest thinkers, and then stay very, very close to their wisdom. It's a form of fortification. And that means a new vision of history, that history is a repository of the great wisdom, that there isn't a problem and could not possibly be a problem that comes to us today that hasn't already been fixed and answered. And for that, you need a very eclectic, open mind, because it'll take you to people that normally you would think were very different or very weird, and you wouldn't normally read them, But you have to stay open and say, I'm not interested in whether this guy was Roman Catholic or Protestant or Jew or not Gentile or, blue as opposed to red. That's not the way to go. If you're coming from that point of view, die, perish, and get your rotten carcass off our fucking planet. Right. You have to have a very, very open mind and go and seek. History has already done it. There is no problems anew. Every problem we're facing and could face has already been addressed by somebody in the past. And secondly, then the divination arts, for the person who's really serious, they have to start getting into astrology and tarot and things like that, the inner zodiac, where people can understand why that is so important. Not everyone is ready for it. It's something that's for the more mature soul, really.
Right. And for those that are ready for it, encourage all of you to check out the Unslaved podcast. Every single initiate in terms of the mystery school on my end, a member of Unslaved. You got to become a member of Unslaved. You got to get on there. You got to check out the different interviews that have been on. I've been on a couple of times. And Michael, I want to continue this in terms of having you come on and expound. We just did this for the first time. Again, in terms of mile markers and what all this means to the procession, we're about to come into the Phoenix cycles. So the rise of Malak Tawas, the rise of the internal dragon, like you were saying, that's spark for us to breach and tap into. I want to thank you for coming on and doing this segment.
Thank you. Well, that's very inspiring. It's good to talk to people who have that level of inspiration and are vehement that, evil will not win. So thanks a lot, Sethicus, for this conversation. I appreciate it.
Everybody out there, check out unslaved.com, become a premium member. And for everybody out there that wants to hail me in terms of initiation and all these things that me and Michael got into, definitely check out his mystery school as well, Taroscopes, and things on my end in terms of initiation into the occult. Michael, you are a fucking legend, and honor me for coming on, man.
You're welcome, mate. Thanks. It's been a long time. Glad they've got it done.
Absolutely, man. Awesome. And again, for everyone listening, go to unslaved.com. Sign up for the premium membership. And for things on my end, check out the website at Black Earth Productions with az.com. Click on the services page and send me an email at blackearthproductions with an S at hotmail.com. Do the full rites initiation session and lay the right foundation in terms of navigation, because everything else out there, included the Black Earth Library, which holds over 40,000 books of occult reference material. You're going to want to get a hold of this, especially in terms of what is coming and what is being developed. And to that, in the words of William Blake himself, the sun arises in the east, clothed in robes of blood and gold, swords and spears and wrath increased, all around his bosom rolled, crowned with warlike fires and raging desires. This is Sethicus Boza, Black Earth Productions, Blue Flame Healing Arts and Occult Science. Be empowered, be encouraged.
The sons of